This is a reading of Death at Devil's Bridge, the fourth book in the Victorian Mysteries series. Chapter 1. Far behind them, Mole, Toad, and the Water Rat heard a faint warning hum, like the drone of a distant bee. Glancing back, they saw a small cloud of dust with a dark center of energy advancing at incredible speed. It was on them. The poop-poop horn of the horn rang with a brazen shout in their ears, and the magnificent motor car, immense, breath-snatching, passionate, with its pilot tense and hugging his wheel, possessed all earth and air for the fraction of a second, flung an enveloping cloud of dust that blinded and enwrapped them utterly, and then dwindled to a speck in the far distance, changed back into a droning bee once more. Kenneth Graham, The Wind in the Willows. The sky was darkening over Dedham Vale as Bess Girton hitched up her woolen skirt, climbed the stile and set off along the margin of Dead Man's Meadow. High overhead skittered an early and erratic bat, half blind in the dying light. Higher yet, in the tops of the horse-chestnut trees, a few rooks offered sombre good nights. Bess tightened her grip on her willow basket. The ominous voices of rooks frightened some, but not her. Rusty death a corn, her neighbour Sally would say, looking up from her knitting when she heard the birds shrieking. Sitting in judgment, she would add with a shudder, and get up to close the casement, passing a death sentence on some poor lost soul. But about rooks Bess knew better. As a girl, some 30 years ago, she had kept a rook called Figwort, a sociable bird with a bright, inquisitive eye. She had raised Figwort from a fledgling, and while he grew up to be a mischievous thief, stealing the odd bit of this and that, he was never the least bit malevolent. No, if the melancholy calls of the sleepy rooks in the dying twilight brought anything back to Bess's mind, it was an ancient longing that harked back to her childhood, a foolish, reckless wish, Sally would say, and surely quite wicked. Her neighbours in Dedham village, Bess had learned long ago, were easily affrighted by what they did not understand, and swift to suspect any impulse that seemed out of the ordinary. And this wish was indeed an extraordinary one, at least by village standards. Audacious, intemperate as it might seem to those who did not dare to think on such things, Bess wanted to fly. And why not, I'd like to know, she would ask herself, truculently. What's wrong with it? And herself would respond, gently reassuring. Nothing's wrong with it, Bessie, my girl. Birds do it, angels do it, your gamma's done it. Now stop shilly-shallying and get on with it. If you're ever going to fly, let it be now. The desire to fly was not uniquely nor even originally Bess's wish. She had learned it from her grandmother, who had raised her from infancy in the whitewashed cottage on Black Brook, which Bess occupied now, together with a company of cats, an ancient Jack Russell Terrier named Fat Susan, and a milk cow named Patience. In those days, Gamma Girton had had two cronies, both of whom could fly, or so Bess understood from the hushed stories she heard around the kitchen fire when she was quite a young girl. And Gamma herself had also flown, Bess was sure of it, for hadn't she seen her with her very own eyes one moonlit night, astride a hurdle, skirts and capes snatching at the brambles as she sailed low over the hedge and into the great wood. Others might have thought it a dream, but not Bess. She had never forgotten the sight of her grandmother silhouetted against the bright full moon, but she was not exactly clear about the details, just how Gamma and her friends managed to get off the ground, that is. The task seemed easy enough, however, and Bess was a brave, strong girl, so she tried it herself, taking a running leap off black rock with Gamma's ash broomstick under her. But all she gained from the excitement was a torn skirt and two badly scratched knees. Questioned at home, she confessed to her effort to get off the ground and begged Gamma to tell her how flying was done. But Gamma, alarmed, sternly bade her to hold her tongue. "Such unchristian foolishness," she cried. "Put it out of your mind this instant, Bessie. Flying? Why, I never heard such nonsense in me life." The true crony vanished from the cottage fireside. Bess never again saw Gamma soar over the bramble hedge, and not one more word was spoken on the subject. When the old woman died at last in Bess' 30th year, the secret of flight unfortunately died with her. During the next dozen years, Bess, who remained unmarried, was so busy with the work of supporting herself that she had little energy to spare for fanciful dreams of flight. Gara had left her a dairy cow and some hens, and Bess made a small living from the milk, cream, butter, and eggs that she sold in the village. She supplemented this income by peddling the asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower from her garden, and by harvesting the willows that grew plentifully along the river Ster, weaving the wands into baskets. She also raised bees in neatly thatched wooden hives ranged on the sunny side of the wattle fence across the back garden. Indeed, so bustling and busy and pleasantly earthbound was Bess's life that her childhood ambition lay like a forgotten memory in the bottom of her heart. Until, that is, the day she noticed a loose slate in the hearth and raised it to discover a cavity beneath. From this hiding place she lifted a curious leather-bound book, printed in black letter and unquestionably ancient, its brown pages annotated with spidery hand-written notes. Reading was reserved for the candlelit hour before bedtime, which Bess always spent with the newspaper supplied by her friend Sarah Pratt, the cook at Bishop's Keep, several miles down the lane. Now, having discovered the book, Bess was so curious that she could scarcely wait until the evening to read it. Unfortunately, however, the black-letter text and the spidery annotations could not be deciphered by the light of a candle, so on the following day Bess purchased a paraffin lamp, an acquisition she had deliberately postponed. She had an inborn distrust of modern inventions, such as the post-office telegraph, which clattered so loudly that one could scarce make oneself heard, or Lord Marston's new horseless carriage, which he drove with such reckless abandon. But the lamp proved quite useful, and Bess sat down in its circle of light to decipher the ancient text. To her disappointment, though, the mysterious book turned out to be nothing more than a collection of ancient recipes. She was about to cast it aside when she turned a page and found a receipt for flying ointment. Her eyes widened, and, tilting the book to the light, she read the recipe with a swelling excitement. Some of the ingredients, honey, goose grease, thyme, basil, chicory, were familiar staples of a larder and garden. Soot, whatever could be the purpose of that ingredient, could be had from a chimney, while flowers, eggs, pig's blood, and some of the less familiar plants, water hemlock for instance, would have to be specially procured. Breathlessly, Bess put down the book and considered. The ointment sounded perfectly odious, to be sure, but what did that matter if it got her over the bramble hedge and into the air like Gamma Gurton? The biggest problem, of course, was gathering the more unusual ingredients without arousing anyone's suspicions. And it was not just the fear of ridicule caused Bess to proceed with caution. The last witch burned to death in England had been set afire near this very village scarcely 10 years before Queen Victoria took the throne. Bess had no intention of giving her neighbours the slightest excuse for holding their tongues on her doings. Whatever she did, she would do so in secret. And so it was that Bess was out and about with her basket on this late summer night, just as the full moon began to rise over Dedham Vale. Following the recipe's instructions, she had scraped from her chimney the pinch of soot, gathered the required number of plover's eggs, plucked the requisite wild herbs, and was at this moment on her way to Bishop's Keep to obtain the pint of fresh pig's blood Sarah Pratt had promised to save for her. The footpath was now almost dark, and she picked her way with caution, half wishing she had not embarked upon this phase of her mission so late in the evening. But as the recipe specified that monk's hood should be gathered at moonrise, and the spot where it grew was more than a halfway to Sarah's kitchen, the journey was necessary. The path dipped steeply through a narrow opening in the dense hedge. Clutching her basket in one hand, Bess half slid down the embankment and into the lane. Bishop's Keep was less than a mile away, and Sarah would have a hot cup of tea and her pint of pig's blood ready and waiting. No questions asked, no answers required. She shook herself, squared her shoulders, and began to march briskly up the road. She heard it before she actually saw it. The sound, a loud metallic clatter and clank, reminded her of the noisy threshing machines that had replaced the hand harvesting of the fall corn. But because the lane was so deep and the tall hedge nearly grew together over her head, the horrible sound seemed to reverberate all around. and she could not tell from which direction it was coming, or which way that she should run. Her breath coming short and fast, Bess pressed her hands against her ears, standing paralyzed with fear in the middle of the lane. It was only when she saw the bright white lights bearing down upon her that she realized she was about to be run down by that most dangerous of modern inventions, a horseless carriage. She flung herself off the road, landing with a mighty splash in the water-filled ditch. Drenched, mouth and eyes filled with mud, she sat up, hurling curses after the motor car, Lord Marston's motor car, which had disappeared with a great clatter around the turn. It took several moments for Bess to drag herself out of the ditch and scramble to her feet in the lane. She found a basket, retrieved what she could of its contents, and started off towards Sarah's kitchen, muttering to herself. A half a mile farther on, as the moon was casting a pale light over the way, she stumbled onto old Jessop's body, lying in the grassy ditch at the gate to Bishop's Keep.